Hello guys, welcome to Watch News Weekly. I'm Roman Sharf, joined alongside with Roman Sharf. I'm all by myself today. How are you, sir? Anyway, wrist check before I forget. I always forget to do this today. I have on the original Urwerk 103. I've always talked about the satellites moving. I talked about the wandering hours from Audemars Piguet. All that stuff was inspired by the clock created for the Pope back in 1682. This is the definition of that watch. It was a very low production run. They made 25 of these, rose gold, white gold. They also did it with a high polish, so same watch but with a high polish. I believe I recorded a short comparing two side by side. If you haven't seen that, check out my Instagram. Now, let's get to some news. This is a Watch News episode, and we're going to start with Brad Pitt, a guy that every guy secretly wished he was, myself included, not going to lie. Brad Pitt he's the man, not going to lie. Now, right now, a lot of news around Brad Pitt and Formula One, obviously because of the movie that's coming out, and he was in Budapest last week for the Grand Prix, where Lewis Hamilton received his 200th podium. I'm going to go ahead and throw that in there because that's my guy. He's the GOAT, much like a Brad Pitt in movies. But anyway, he was wearing an interesting watch. He was wearing a 70s IWC Ingenieur. It was the OG Ingenieur created by Gérald Genta, as we know it. 40 millimeters. It's a 40 millimeter watch. It was still sort of alongside of that sports luxury watch lines that Gérald Genta designed for Paddock, for Audemars Piguet, as well as IWC. Now, normally you get around a racing track, the first thing you're thinking, well, where's the chronograph? There's no chronograph, right? And IWC Ingenieur is indeed not a chronograph. So obviously you're not timing laps with this thing. The integrated H-link bracelet, anti-magnetic movement, is the watch that he was wearing. Now, we talk about anti-magnetic movements today, like, okay, yeah, and every watch is anti-magnetic right now. Yeah, but back then that was a big deal, right? The industrial looking bezel, right? It gave it that futuristic bent, if you will. If I were to align that watch to Formula One, I would probably say that at the time Genta was creating the Royal Oak, the Ingenieur, as well as the Nautilus, he was sort of bending the future or bending the design of design when it comes to watches, much like what Formula One does year in and year out, as far as pushing the envelope on design as well as function, if you will, right? And of course, design within Formula One obviously ties back to performance. And I think there is a really good tie on both. And one thing I noticed is that his watch had a green dial. Now, it is not known that this watch forever to be produced with a green dial. So I don't know if that's a custom thing that Brad Pitt had done by IWC or somebody else. I don't know of any original IWC Ingenieurs that actually had that dial, the one that he's wearing. And oddly enough, I happen to have an IWC Ingenieur original. Of course, this one is a quartz model made to fight what we call the quartz crisis. And every single major company did that because that was the newest, hottest, and latest and greatest things. Of course, now today we frown upon quartz watches, but what you don't frown upon is the fact that these are fairly rare to come by, both quartz or automatic. So an important watch, a rare watch. Let's go to the next piece of news. Gen Z. Gen Z is somebody who was born between the years of 97? Like late 90s, early 2000s, right? Is that who Gen Z? So that would be my son. Now, this is according to Watchfinder & Co. They did some research in the UK, and they basically found that brand prestige, trust, sustainability, and investment potentials are driving demand for Gen Z. I'm gonna say right away, I agree with most of what Watchfinder & Co. did. I think this is a hell of a research to do to begin with. And they're saying that over a third, 35% of Gen Z state that are likely to purchase a luxury watch within the next year. Research also showed that Gen Z is spending more on luxury watches than other demographics. Over 10% of them already own a luxury timepiece valued between 1,000 to 7,500 pounds. So about 10 grand, more than the market average of 8%. It'll come as no surprise that social media is cited that the number one resource for Gen Z when it comes to watch shopping, and 71% of them say they turn to social media for inspiration, and over a tenth, 14%, they refer to influencer content when conducting watch research. I don't know how that's different. Influencer content usually comes through via social media. I would rephrase that they are influenced by social media and inspired by social media. I think it's in reverse. It's the social media that pushes them in that direction. It's not them going to social media to be pushed in that direction, if you will. And as far as influencer contact when conducting research, that's them, again, going to YouTube, to Instagram. So I don't know how, those two, to me, I feel are the same. Now, This created a huge opportunity for the pre-owned watch market. In fact, over 80% of Gen Z who have purchased a luxury watch purchased it pre-owned. And over half, 58%, stated their primary reason for purchasing pre-owned was the better affordability. Well, if you go back a few years, it's most likely not just affordability, it's more like availability, because that's the game we played during the COVID times. Today, it is come down to affordability because it is a buyer's market, so certainly I can believe that. But in general, over the last 5 years, I would probably make a call out to availability, because these young kids, they want the hottest, the latest, and the greatest, which for the most part was Rolex. I'm surprised there's no Rolex stat in here. I guarantee you over 35% of them went for Rolex. Brand prestige is key. All right, so over a third, 34% of Gen Z stated that owning a well-known luxury brand is the driving force when it comes to purchasing a watch. 34%, which means exactly that. So this next slide looks like was a bit of an interview where they asked a bunch of Gen Zers saying, hey, what watch would you own? It's no surprise that Rolex tops that list. Now, the numbers are a little bit confusing. Theoretically, this should add up to 100% altogether, but it's not the case because they were asked about multiple brands. And let's say if this was out of 100, you had 55 people out of 100 say Rolex, 44 Omega, and so on and so forth. And the brands that are on here, Rolex, no surprise. Omega, Tech Heuer, Cartier, Breitling, no surprise. Hublot, no surprise. As much as you guys love hating on Hublot, Hublot's still one of the top sellers out there. Paddock, a bit of a surprise there at only 17%. I would expect for them to say otherwise, but I think the reason for that is affordability, right? I think the low numbers on Hublot and Paddock is because out of the gate, those watches are a lot more expensive than at average £7,500 or $10,000 roughly price range. Zenith is no surprise. Zenith has been coming up, so I'm glad to see that 10 people out of 10 mentioned Zenith as well, because with some of their latest models they're doing well. I'm surprised not to see Bulgari on here, because Bulgari's been doing well with their Octafinissimo line. Tudor is a little surprising to me, but I think Tudor still lives in the shadow of Rolex, and it's like that other cheaper Rolex, quote unquote. And I am pleasantly surprised to see a brand like Jaeger. Would love to see IWC in here. I would love to see Panerai in here. There's quite a few more brands that I would love to see in here, and I don't know if some of those brands fell off based on a certain cutoff, a number of people that mentioned it, but not very surprised. These numbers seem in line, and they would certainly line up with this. If I did the same research across our sales over the last 5 years, I wouldn't be surprised that we align pretty much to the T. Let's go to the next piece of news, and that's going to be Hodinkee. How do I go about this nicely? Something that became the sexy thing in the eyes of all these big companies that said, hey, I think that we all want a chunk of this secondary market, this pre-owned market. All the numbers saying that, oh, the pre-owned market should catch on to the primary market by year 2026 was a bunch of bullshit, because at the time that was reported a few years back, the secondary market has already been bigger than the primary market. And again, I've said it before, the reason the big boys can't report on it properly is because they don't have access to tangible data. They cannot go into my books. I mean, they can find out what I'm reporting in sales. If they asked me, I would tell them. But it's not guys like me, it's the guys that are on the chats daily, trading watches back and forth, B2B, not B2C. It's the amount of goods that are being traded on a daily basis across Facebook groups, Instagram groups, et cetera, that you really can't get tangible data from. So you have tangible data that you can get from primary dealers and companies, but you certainly can't get it on the secondary. But enough about that. It made our industry super sexy, especially during COVID times. During the COVID boom, our industry became one of the sexiest things in the world. Some companies made move. Hodinkee, we were launched in 2008, I believe, right? And this was a website for watch enthusiasts. This was a modern version of let's see, what was some of the older blogs that I used to read? Time Zone, right? That was one of them. But obviously bigger, better, with really, really creative content, excellent writing. I can't take anything away from Hodinkee, right? As far as I'm concerned, you know, they did a tremendous job. And I know what it takes, because our great market magazine, which, believe it or not, has become top 100 watch publications in the world, is not an easy feat. You know, you really have to get people that know what they're doing, that know what they're talking about, and to write interactive content, because people want to look at pictures and scroll today. To get somebody to stop and read for 15 minutes is not an easy feat, and Hodinkee did a tremendous job on that. Now, February 2021, the Chernin Group finances them, and they decide to become a watch retailer. Now, they weren't a stranger to that, because they made certain limited editions alongside with certain brands that they partnered with, and they always did well. In fact, most of that stuff sold out instantly, sold over lists, etc. But they decided to acquire Crown and Caliber, thinking, oh, we're going to go into this pre-owned thing. And guess what? They never achieved profitability over the next 3 years. And if somebody asked me today as to why they didn't achieve that profitability, is because you can't go into something thinking that you know what you're doing based on the fact that you know everything there is to know about watches, or that you may have sold certain limited editions or did some collabs with other companies and they did really, really well, right? They went under a massive, multiple rounds of layoffs. I think they hired too many people to begin with. And then the market shifted and they weren't prepared for that. And that's one thing, that was the biggest mistake, is not realizing that, hey, things are great in 2021, but they don't stay great forever. The market does shift and you have to be prepared for that. You have to really understand the market. It's not enough just to understand watches and horology. This is a completely different ball game. This isn't me, quietly smiling to the fact that they obviously failed. This is not, by all means, I respect Hodinkee as a company. I respect what they do. I respect Ben Clymer. I think that they are a wonderful, wonderful organization. I mean, I kind of wish they spoke with me before making that move. Maybe we could have done something better together. Nothing bad to say about Crown and Caliber either. It's just, again, this is a situation where if tomorrow I decided to go into the car business, let's say I want to sell high-end collectible cars, and even though I may think I know a thing or two about cars, it's not enough. It's not just about knowing the product, it's about understanding the market and how that world turns, and understanding that it's never this, it's always this, right? But now, from what I understand, Hodinkee is going back to their roots. They're staying, obviously, one of the most, if not most popular watch blogs on the planet. They're still going to continue with their limited editions, so the marketplace is technically not going away. I would love to learn the faith of Crown and Caliber, the inventory that's behind it, because call me, maybe I'll buy it. Swatch and Omega introduces yet another Swatch Omega watch. This is the Super Blue Moonphase. Now, Super Blue Moon happens, what, once every 3 years or something, 33 months? And again, the blue on blue color palette of the Moonwatch mission to the Super Blue Moonphase reminds us of the Neptune Moonswatch, which inadvertently came up as the fan favorite. This has a panda dial, silver opaline face contrasted with blue subdials. At 2 o'clock, the double moon phase aperture shows all blue moons set against a dark celestial background. And instead of a tachometer scale, a pulsometer runs along the bezel. A first feature on the Moonswatch collection. Completing the full blue uniform, the company blue Velcro strap is finished with blue stitching. $310 price tag. Beautiful watch. I was a fan of the Omega X Swatch collaboration from day one. I didn't care about people saying they were making too many or everybody's jumping on the bandwagon, it's cheapening the brand and blah, 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 blah. No. Guys, the Swatch watch at one time was the savior of the Swiss watch industry altogether. Let's start there. Second of all, I've said in the beginning, and I'm going to stand by it again, and I don't care if they make another 50 editions. These things are going to continue selling like hotcakes. It's slowed down in terms of, them selling over list and so on and so forth, but that's going to slow down. But Swatch will not be in shortage of clientele to sell these things by hundreds of thousands. And the reason for that is because you get collectors that own $100,000 watches buying these things because they like this as a beater watch, because they like it, because it looks cool, because they like it of what it represents, right? But my number one reason for standing behind these products was always one thing, and that is bringing new blood of collectors into the hobby, those that can afford a $300 watch or a $250 watch. I forget, they came out of the gate cheaper, the first versions, I believe. So as far as I'm concerned, you're getting a cool watch for $300, just like any other Swatch watch out there, right? You go into the Swatch watch store and there's a slew of options, and people buy them, and they buy them every day. This one just makes it that much more special. And again, if Swatch is able to bring in a new collector that 5 years from now ends up going into a real Omega, Rolex, or something else, and this is the stepping stone, or what do we call that, the gateway drug, then by all means, they're doing a wonderful job, and the watch looks cool. Affordable options from Breitling. New Endurance Pro 38 chronographs in a rainbow of colors. Fun, affordable, relatively speaking, watches from a very, very popular brand. Now, look, it's been the most accessible. These have been the most accessible sports watches within the Breitling collections, right? They're getting their hands on the watch at a slightly lower price tag. These watches are coming in at $3,250, which, if you look at some of the entry-level Breitlings out there, you're spending $5,000 to $6,000. So it's very, very affordable relative to some of their other stuff, relative to other entry-level brands in the likes of, let's say, Panerai, IWC, Jaeger, Rolex, Omega, etc., right? And they're fun. I wonder if these were specifically targeting Gen Z. Nice size, 38 millimeters, neither too big, neither too small. Bidirectional bezels, compass scales, screw-on case backs. Look, the first release came in white, blue, and red colorways, which came with matching rubber straps and dials for a cohesive look. However, in the latest update, Breitling has updated its offering to now include purple and pink colorways for relatively no money. Again, in comparison to entry-level pieces, I think Breitling is doing a great job. At least what I'm not seeing is them trying to go after the Rolex OP line. So when Omega came out with colorful, different color dials and so on and so forth, and some other brands jumped on the bandwagon, they're not. Breitling is doing their own thing. They're sticking to their roots. You look at that watch without knowing it's a Breitling, you can right away, aviation, maybe a bit of a diver effect with some of the blue colorways. Kudos to Breitling to sticking to their roots, coming out with a product that's more affordable. And again, perhaps they watched the Watchfinder & Co. report and realized that, hey, Gen Z is reaching for Breitling, and they can only afford so much, so let me do that. Sometimes you get an item that the discount on the secondary is almost not worth it to get. So let's say if you were out there and you're able to get 20% off on this item once it hits the secondary market from $3,200, and let's say you were able to buy it for $2,600, it almost makes the consumer feel like, you know what, I would prefer to spend the extra $600 to go directly into Breitling, get the boutique experience, buy the full list. Yeah, if I sell it late and I lose $1,000, it's not that big a deal, because let's say you got a $100,000 timepiece and you lose 20%, that's 20 grand. You get a timepiece like this and you lose 30%, you only have lost $1,000, right? So it's like that number, that dollar amount does make a difference. While we look at things from a percentage perspective, most consumers do not, right? It's like you go into a Swatch boutique and you buy any other Swatch watch for $150, you know it's not worth anything when you walk out the door, and you're okay with that. If that watch was $150,000, obviously things would be different. But good job, Brightling. Big question here. Is Rolex shorting the market on new watches to drive its certified pre-owned program? Big disclaimer for you guys. Anybody out there that tells you anything about Rolex that they know, in terms of production numbers, in terms of what's planned inside the company, in terms of them allocating certain things, producing certain models, etc., they're lying to you. Nobody has that information. It's all hearsay, and it's all something that could be either a rumor that gets spread or common sense, right? Like I can sort of gauge certain things when it comes to production numbers, demand, et cetera, based on how the market is performing, based on what demand is like, based on availability of products in the primary and the secondary, right? But at the end of the day, if I told you, hey, next month you're going to see 486 Pepsis come out to the Middle East distribution chain, then I'm lying. Nobody knows that information. But you know, a lot of talk and a lot of experts out there, and these experts are saying that Rolex is not intentionally shorting the new market, but has run up against an unexpectedly high global demand. Rolex is in high global demand. Surprise, surprise. There's still a waiting list for most models for years at every single one of those ADs. So that's just using common sense. One source told us that the idea that Rolex intentionally short supply is all bullshit, just rumors. Exactly what I just said. If you talk for 10 minutes with Rolex CEO, you'll learn that he's not happy, that his retailers are not happy about the lack of new product. I'll take that with a grain of salt. But in reality, the retailers are his clients, and if your client isn't happy, obviously you're not happy. But considering how many doors now belong to Rolex selling these Rolexes, and now the addition of Booker being bought over, which adds another 50 doors, I believe, I think he's okay. Paul Allen, of the non-certified pre-owned dealership Bob's Watches, told Rob Report that my gut reaction is no. They are not intentionally shorting supply because global demand is so high they can hardly handle it. I will agree with Paul at exactly what I kind of just said earlier. Another Watch World insider told Rob Report that Rolex doesn't intentionally short supply, but during COVID, Rolex got caught with their pants down. 100% agree. It wasn't just Rolex. Everybody got caught with their pants down. You have to shut down for an X amount of time, and you don't have merchandise, and you stop production, you don't have like backlog merchandise in case of an emergency such as this, which most watch companies do not. Obviously, you're going to get caught with your pants down. An expert watch collector and a watch industry veteran who prefers anonymity didn't mince words. Daytona production is artificially reduced. Rolex wants that one hard-to-get watch, and they've done it with the Daytona since 1988. I'm going to call bullshit on that because the Daytona is the #1 selling most popular watch. Therefore, the demand on it was always higher. I don't think they purposely lowered the production of stainless steel Daytonas in order to create this because it got created naturally. It's not like they came out with Daytona and all of a sudden, oh my God, we need to short this because this is a really, really popular model. Shorting supply is a standard luxury strategy. Not only does shorting supply allow a brand to drive prices skyward, but it creates the air of exclusivity as well as an actual exclusion. Okay, you got the obvious by the balls here. I get it. Listen, it's, a lot of high-end brands do this. So Ferrari, Louis Vuitton, Hermes, any number of watch brands these days, Rolex now behaves according to the textbook luxury brand protocol of keeping supply way below demand. Again, I'm going to call semi-bullshit on that. You have to understand something. Rolex is a well-run oiled machine. One of the things that always impressed me about Rolex, and people ask me, what is the one thing that impresses you about Rolex? Well, if you look outside of watches, it was their distribution and production, right? To be able to keep your finger on the pulse on global demand and how much you can actually sell so that your demand stays so high that stuff rarely discounts. So forget COVID days, forget the stuff that's trading over list right now. Let's go backwards a little bit when the only watch that was selling over list was the Rolex Daytona. They were able to keep up to a point where you never saw Rolexes being sold at below dealer cost. You never had a situation where a Rolex dealer would be like, oh, you know what? My cost is minus 37. I'll sell you this at 50 off because I really can't get rid of it. That never really happened unless you go back a while. But Rolex has been smart enough to understand the world that we live in, understand the power of social media, to understand the power of influence, to understand that, by sponsoring certain events, by having certain ambassadors, by being in people's face all day, every day, and by being money in the bank, most of all, we're going to be successful. So believe me, Rolex is going to continue playing catch up to that demand because the worst thing you can do is have demand at 10 and supply at 5. You're not taking advantage and you're not really making money as a company. And now with the addition of Booker, I think we're going to see a slight increase in that production. So they might go from that million, whatever, and change watches they make a year to slightly higher. Because you know what? If you got a list of millions of people that are on the list to receive a particular watch, and that list now is starting to push 5, 6, 7, 8 years, as a company, you will produce more. Is that going to hurt the brand? No, because the popularity and the exposure and everything else continues going up. Yeah, it's not like this, like it was during COVID, but it's still going up. And Rolex is king, and there's a reason for that. So a lot of these statements and a lot of these things that are said here are semi-true, some are complete bullshit as far as I'm concerned. And to answer the main question on what I think, is Rolex shorting the market of new watches to drive a certified pre-owned program? Absolutely not. According to a source that told Rob Report, the certified pre-owned program, they're treating the certified pre-owned program as if it's a separate brand, and it's on the same level as Tudor. I don't know about all that. There's no separate trays for CPO watches, and they're not allowed to be displayed in the same room, right? And they've asked if Rolex trained the salespeople to leverage scarcity of new models towards Rolex CPO offerings. They said, if the customer says they want to buy something today, then we mention CPO, but generally Rolex offers no incentive or instruction to salespeople to pivot from inquiries of new models to the CPO offerings. I will call bullshit on that, because if I'm a salesperson, whether I'm working for an AD or I'm working for a Rolex door, I'm for sure am going to pivot to CPO right away, and it's going to happen 99 out of 100 times because nothing else is available. And Eric Wynn suggested that authorized dealers are being made to take CPO to keep their account, and they had to buy a lot of pre-owned models. Absolutely not. Rolex dealers want to be part of the CPO program. Granted, they're a little bit more expensive, but market will even out eventually, so they're in for the long play. And I've spoken to a ton of those Rolex dealers that I know personally, that each of them has told me that, yeah, I like CPO. Granted, it's a little tough right now with the pricing and so on and so forth and the cost of going through the program, but eventually we'll all even out. So again, to answer your question, is Rolex shorting the market of new watches to drive a certified pre-owned? My answer is absolutely not. I think Rolex is playing catch up on the existing demand that they have, and they're not thinking about Rolex CPO. They're just taking a chunk of that big pie at one point that Hodinkee wanted to take by purchasing Crowd and Caliber. The difference is they know what the f they're doing. With that said, I am going to tell you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Roman, thank you for joining me. And as always, guys, I'll see you next week. Like, comment, share, subscribe. See you in the next one.